I call this meeting of the land use working group to order. I would like to make a roll call on who is present here. So first I start hopefully in alphabetical order. Rob Almeida here. Keith Berkman here. Paul Böhm is excused. Matt Boger here. Mary Hartman here. Judith Long online. Can you?
She's muted. She should be able to.
Oh, there.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm just messing around with a dual monitor setup in a hotel room.
Tracy Marano
Here.
Mark Martinez. No. Linda Miller
Here.
and Sven Weber here. So we have well over a quorum. Nice improvement to last time. Let's start with public comments first. Any public comments on things that are not on the agenda? I don't see any. Let's move to approve of the minutes, and I think these are minutes that were distributed in a package of 2 meetings. I hope everyone had a chance to review them. Any comments? Any additions? I hear none. Do I hear a motion to approve the 2 minutes?
So moved.
Seconded. Okay, now I'll do a roll call again. Here's my list. Here we go. Rob Almeida?
Yes.
Keith Berkman?
Yes.
Matt Boger?
Yes.
Mary Hartman?
Yes.
Judith Long? Messing around again?
Yes, sorry.
Tracy Marano?
Yes.
Linda Miller?
Yes.
Sven Weber? Yes. All right, here is approved. So let's move to reports of the subcommittees. So before we start on this different subcommittees, just want to highlight that everyone is working hard at the moment and trying to get things in order, discussing options, identifying additional informational needs in parallel. The town is working hard in bringing this additional information on the table or preparing and getting studies done. So from a timeline perspective, for everyone just to understand where the groups need to end up in the January timeframe, I would guess mid to end January, we need to have from the subgroups a status report back and identifying the different options they analyzed, the different options that are prioritized, and ideally an order of the prioritization. I understand there might be potentially even options that are equally important and ranked them equally. But I think it's important for the select board at that time frame to understand where the directional path is on the different paths. It is not a decision at that time. It's narrowing it down to options and a potential order. Yeah. So with that, let's start with the group. I think that is really working on all cylinders, which is the municipal consolidation.
Yes.
Everyone's waiting. So who's taking the lead and providing that?
I'll do that. Yeah, we're doing well. We've got a list of options. We've narrowed it down to, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. We have a list of the pros and the cons of each option, and we're filling in the financial information, which I think is an important consideration when we get to the prioritization of these options. The options that we've narrowed down are number 1, we're calling that the status quo, which would be no consolidation of our 18 sites, and we would sell Peabody because we don't have a need for it, but we would retain the playing fields. The second option we're evaluating is to consolidate the offices to a renovated Peabody and we would renovate that to a net zero. The third option is we would consolidate to a new building at the Peabody site, again, retaining the playing fields. The fourth option would be to consolidate to a new building at Ripley. And the fifth option would be to buy and renovate a new municipal building somewhere in the town of Concord. So like I said, we've already looked at some of the pros and the cons of each of these options. We've quantified the revenues that we would get from each option. So for example, for the status quo, a revenue would be the sale of Peabody. For the consolidate to renovate Peabody, a revenue stream from that would be the money we would unlock by selling all of the sites that we're consolidating from. And then we look at the cost, what would the cost be? And then we get the net benefits. So we're still working that through. We've got, right now, I think we're kind of in a holding mode because we're waiting for some pieces of data. I don't know if you're gonna, Sonny, you're gonna later on talk about consolidating all the data that we need.
Yeah, I think we will
Then I'll hold
talk
off.
about.
I'll hold off on that.
Here, you start and I stop you when it's getting,
Too crazy?
yeah.
Okay. We're looking for appraisals for Peabody, Ripley, Harvey, Wheeler, Carousel 55 Church Street Cluster and 141 Kais Road. That's just the DPLN building. I know we're considering the sale of that entire site, but for the consolidation purpose, we're only interested in that building. So we'd like the appraised values at their current zoning. We'd like the appraised values if we were to change the zoning to a B zoning. We'd like the appraised values if we were to assume a C zoning. We need renovation costs for Peabody. I think that's already in the information that we have. We'd like renovation costs for a new municipal building. We need to understand the CapEx for the townhouse for the next 10 years, operating expenses for the townhouse for the next 10 years. Space requirements for Ripley. So if we were to consolidate Ripley, what are the space requirements? Moving costs for all of these moving parts and furniture, fixture and equipment costs per employee. I have this all in writing.
Okay, great.
That's enough.
That's a little, just for the records, Mark Martinez Jones. So you're, close to a full house, that's great, wonderful.
Okay, so that's all I've got. Would Tracy, you're thinking?
No, we were, I was gonna take yours, Mary, now that we're in the full meeting. Do you want me to put who's responsible for those things and put it in a chart? Would that be helpful or no? Or does everybody know what they need to do?
I think so. I think I was just gonna send these to Shannon and Megan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because they're collecting them all. So
Right,
if you
we
wanna,
have them, we have them. They already sent it to us. The
They have
data
what?
needs, the data needs.
but we've got more here. Than we,
Yeah. More than-
you have more there than what we
We have
currently
more.
have.
we have more on our list
Okay.
than they had in their
Okay,
table.
Put everything for her.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna put everything to her. So I'll copy you.
Yeah.
And if you wanna tell them who's responsible, that'd be great.
yeah,
I don't want.
There's one question I have on, that's mainly on the status quo scenario,
Mm,
and that is Ripley.
yeah.
mm.
Is, we got your needs for consolidation on the school side, but
Yeah.
what's the, let's say, 10+ year thinking on the school side on Ripley, because if that
Yeah.
stays there, that might just need significant cost or not significant cost.
Yes, so our current thinking is we're not touching anything unless it breaks.
Yeah, but if it breaks.
I know, if it breaks, it's gonna
It
be a
breaks
problem.
big and
It breaks big, especially the heating system is like, I think that's the biggest concern over at Ripley. So we don't have a 10-year plan for that. We don't even have a 5-year plan for that. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode. It's not the greatest thing to do, but we don't want to ask the town for any more money.
so that's just. So right now, it sounds like your working assumption on the school side is that. Like, if there is a consolidation,
We're waiting on this outcome before we
yeah,
decide.
but the group can't, for example, could you make a recommendation to the subgroup? To keep the status quo without knowing what the plan is for Ripley.
So what we had done last year was, so we have a study of Ripley. And I think you have that all in the.
Okay, that's a 5-year,
It's a 5-year of what we could replace, but it's very expensive.
yeah,
So we're not talking about it for FY 27. There's nothing happening at Ripley for FY 27. And we haven't gone beyond that.
Yeah,
We're kind of waiting to see what was going on with this committee first.
yeah, but I'm more concerned is can you as subgroup even judge the status quo?
No, I think we have
Without
to
that
make some
information.
assumption about if we don't consolidate Ripley,
Then this
what's
is
the
what the-
investment we have to make to
Yeah.
keep that functioning?
And we do have that, like, we have an actual, what the recommendations were. and-
That's right. I
And
read
what to
that.
start with, so we
Yep.
do have that,
Good.
but it's extensive. But
Right,
I'm happy to add that in there.
Yeah, I already, well, I have.
You have it,
I
you
have,
have it.
I have,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I'll use that.
And we have, that's only a 5-year estimate,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I put it in year 5,
okay.
and I don't have anything from year 5 to 10.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what we need to think about a little bit.
Or at
more.
least, or at minimum do an explorer around it there,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, I can do that.
I don't know where you are, if there's an option you're seriously having at one of the top 2, then that
Yes.
information needs to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
But if status quo is gonna happen, we are gonna have to start investing in Ripley.
yes, exactly. And that's what we got from the Gorman report.
Yep.
Good,
Yep.
yeah, so I'll use that. And then if that's one of our priorities, as you said, we'll take a deeper dive in years 5 through 10.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so then the next group I wanna call out here is, Public Works, we just had a meeting, so let's
Oh.
do that.
Okay. Moving up. Um. At this point, Public Works, continues to identify options. Obviously, the first name on anyone's list seems to be MCI Concord. And, the complexity of that is that, not only is the land use working group thinking of this, but also the MCI Concord Advisory Board. That group, in conjunction, with DCAM, Select Board is probably moving toward, a master plan consideration, for, the MCI site. And I think that the land use working group, and the subcommittee, will become more informed about that process, shortly. So, stay tuned. Perhaps, the select board will be discussing that, in the near term, but, we can't just assume that MCI Concord is going to be at the optimal site or, one of them. So the other sites that are looked at, would be renovation of the Pies Road site and or plus additional, properties around that, the Ripley, site. We just went on a tour of, Bedford Road, the wastewater treatment facility to assess, in a site visit, what the nuances of that site could be. Also under consideration is 755 Walden Street, which, is an interesting option. And then 2229 Main Street, everyone is, or many of us have visited recently, and also, possibly, properties on Virginia Road. So it's a long list. What we've done so far is, create a list of criteria that we will be assessing, and, costs, that, the assessors have, property values for the site. And then location, is another key, criteria, and there, we've, arranged a sort of a, how far is it from town centers in terms of the MBTA station? And then the size of the property, assuming that we need about 13, 14 acres at minimum, to fit, adequately, Public Works Department. And then, adjusting that, using GIS data for areas that, have sensitivity, in terms of wetlands and such. So Shannon has posted that information, on, the group website. And also now we're beginning to look at, peer, towns, because many of them are facing the same issues that we have for Public Works and or wastewater treatment. And, hopefully we'll be, having some site visits to, nearby towns, that the Public Works Department will be looking at over the next couple of weeks as well. So, it's in data collection. We're not at the stage of analysis, but hopefully we will be, by the end of this month, having another meeting to sort of analyze what we've got to date.
Question, I'd like to, so, thank you, long list of options. I've got two questions. One is, when you looked at expanding the wastewater treatment plant that we currently have on Bedford, did you also consider any restrictions that on that land nearby? You must have, right? Any agricultural or
Yeah, I
conservation?
mean, there are restrictions on just about every piece of land, including the current property that Public Works is on. So in that regard, you can look at, that's what the GIS adjustments were for. So, if you look on the site, anything that is wetlands within the 200 feet of the riverfront, et cetera, is adjusted to try and get a useful proxy for what the land size is that could be buildable, but we haven't said, I think once we go through the criteria, that will be a ranking factor of, is this site so complex with so many restrictions that we can't possibly use it?
Okay, I have another question. We struggled with using appraised value or assessed value when we were thinking about the value of the land we were unlocking in a given option, right? Did you, so I thought I heard you say assessed.
We, just to put, I mean, I don't know that at this point, we're ready to make any investments in terms of getting appraised values, for any of the unique properties that we would be looking at. We're not.
I think that
It's not real, I mean, we have in kind of like, it's more like opportunity costs, like what is the assessed value of A versus B? In terms of, and then,
so to,
yes, if you said, oh, this is used for agricultural land, it's a value of $350 a year to the town. We didn't look and say, oh, what would happen if you change that to the value of housing, and then what the opportunity cost difference would be. We're just looking at what the town is currently.
yeah, I think
It's
just
really rough.
the scope of putting a value behind a piece of land is much smaller than we're using. So Judy and I will make sure that the same metrics
Good.
that are used in, for example, in your group
Okay,
are getting used over there.
Okay.
Yeah, that then if you say, okay, you need to put a value behind a certain lot,
yes,
we are just using the same metric to be
Okay.
consistent between the different groups.
okay.
Yeah,
Linda, what, when we toured the DPW, we had talked about possibly splitting up water and sewer and DPW. So if you assume 13 to 14, you assume MCI may be an option. And let's just use 50 acres for simple math. You're talking 26 to 28% of MCI just for DPW. Which I, in the group I represent, the Economic Vitality Committee, is pushing commercial. So there's gonna be a stress there if you take 28-30% and say, well, we want that to be municipal. A lot of people want to expand the current wastewater to include sand pits. And then we want open space and we want housing. To my constituency, commercial shrinking. So I guess first question is, does it really have to be 13 to 14? What sort of peer analysis has been done as far as what this population needs as far as DPW? Is it right sized? And what is the sort of sweet spot of how many square feet that building should be? And there's a whole separate issue as to whether we should break off water and sewer. And I think that whole analysis needs to be done because it's gonna be hard to find 13 to 15 acres in town.
That's really what the analysis of the MCI advisory board is doing, as opposed to this committee. I mean, that they, you know, and will benefit from their doing that analysis and have some of that analysis already done in terms of what they've been provided with. But I don't know that we need to do that. We need to do that in conjunction with them because we have to both be working off the same wants and needs for that property to be optimized for the town as a whole.
So just so I understand, so since Alan's in the audience, so I can pick on him. So is DPW having a direct conversation with MCI and DPW is saying, hey, the bare minimum we need is this, we'd like to have that. I mean, how are we getting to optimizing how many square feet DPW needs as opposed to maybe wants?
So the conversation is, there's a programmatic needs, which we haven't advanced over at MCI yet. We have the report from TVA. Again, one thing I'd caution is, that's a pretty good document, you know, we gotta kind of proof that up, but that's where the 14 acres comes from, right? From a professional, you know, company who's evaluated public works and ours specifically. That's where the 14 acres come from. Working with MCI, we have not yet had a consultant go in to look at the space in our existing campus. That is going to be in the works. We just don't have that information yet. They're the ones to determine, as far as looking at existing campus structures, how would public works fit? That's the question that we don't have an answer yet. All we've done identify is, generally speaking, the area around the wastewater treatment plant, talked about area of expanding the wastewater treatment plant. That's a little bit more concrete, but not the public works in that campus yet.
And if you were to break off water and sewer and put them somewhere else, does 14 shrink to 12 or 10, or is it like 13, or where's it go?
The answer would be yes. However, we haven't done that analysis, and part of that analysis is the cost to do so. And I will be clear, because I've been up at the 40,000 foot range a lot. It's possible, but it's hard to imagine how it would be economical. But we haven't done that analysis yet.
Okay, other questions for the public works group? None. So then we go to public safety. Judah, do you want to take a lead on that, or?
Sure, happy to do so. Hi, everyone. Reporting from very, very cold Canada, slushy, mushy, snowy Canada. But it's not affecting my mood though. No, I'm just slushy and cold. It is affecting my technology, however, but hopefully this will all work. So public safety, I feel like we have sort of a slightly less complex task in front of us in many ways relative to public works and to municipal consolidation, because I just feel like the options are a little bit more straightforward, the needs are a little bit less controversial and so forth. And as a result, I think we're just about ready to write our subgroup report. And I'll spend a little bit of time when we get to the work plan component of the agenda, sort of laying out how we're thinking about that so that it might be constructive for the other two groups as you move forward in thinking about how your reports are going to look. But in general, we're pretty far along with our needs assessments. We have material in now from both the police and fire chiefs that are detailing, you know, where they feel the current condition of the existing buildings falls short, how it may or may not be able to meet future needs, not only in terms of you know, employment growth, which we anticipate, frankly, to be minimal with regard to building footprint, but also changes in technology and changes in training needs and so forth. So I feel like we're really sort of getting a handle on needs assessment. We have identified our options, and I feel like I went through them at our last meeting in some detail, using them as an example. I'm happy to throw that slide back up again. But I can briefly reiterate them here. We also have a status quo option. We're including it for for the need to be able to demonstrate that we've been comprehensive and that we've looked at status quo in every scenario. This is important, although I think it's fairly clear in the context of the public safety group that status quo is not really it's not a long-term solution, it's not a medium-term solution, and it may not even be a short-term solution, but it remains on our list. Then we are looking at hybrid scenarios that would include potentially renovating the Walden Street campus and or building new on the Walden Street campus or building new elsewhere, et cetera. So there's a variety of different options with regard to the Concord Center side. We are having a debate about the degree to which it is feasible to renovate the Walden Street campus. That's kind of our that's our big piece of missing information right now. Certainly, there are a range of opinions about whether or not it's possible to renovate effectively that building. And when we say effectively, that means both from a cost point of view, but also from the ability to provide the service level that's required relative to the investment. So we are getting some expert input on that question. We will be hiring a consultant to do a renovation feasibility analysis for that building, something fairly broad overview. We intend for that study to be less than $10,000. There are many consultants active in this space who specialize in public safety buildings who should be able to come in and give us a pretty quick read. The reason that we need that information is because it will actually change the slate and number of options that we're reviewing. Because if renovating the Walden Street campus falls off the table, then we have a shorter list, right? This is the kind of analysis that all of the groups are doing right now with regard to what options are feasible and what aren't. With regard to the West Concord fire station, renovation is not controversial in that case because it's simply not possible to renovate or expand effectively on the existing site. So that dealing with the West Concord fire station, the options, again, status quo is on the list, but it's not a likely option that we would recommend. But it would involve on the West Concord side building new on the West Concord site existing or looking at another site. So that's the variety of options. Again, I have the chart if folks want to see it. We've also done some benchmarking, and I'm starting to pass some benchmarking information along to the other groups as well. I do have an intern lined up to do some benchmarking work for us across the three groups. So we will be benchmarking town halls, construction, we will be benchmarking public works projects, and we will be benchmarking fire and police buildings as well so that we can get some up-to-date data on the costs of those projects. So that's pretty much an update. We are pretty much ready to start drafting our report, and happy to talk about that in more detail when we get to the work plan update.
And if it should just supplement, if looking at the options we are discussing, I think the common thread there is that most likely the main fire station would be in West Concord. Given all the population growth that is happening, given the heat map that we already have today, it might make sense to think conceptually in main fire station in West Concord. Still a smaller fire station here, but just acknowledge what is going on and our population growth and all the development happening over there.
Just add one footnote.
Okay.
So Judith, my dog didn't eat my homework, but I can't find my homework at the present point. That being said, I do remember that at our last subcommittee meeting, I was tasked with thinking about how public-private partnerships may work. And they're actually now, putting aside politics for a second, if you look across the country, there are private-public partnerships in municipal building. So you're starting to see them now in police, you're starting to see them now in fire. And I actually, as a side note, I have a friend who works for one of the largest private construction companies in the country, and that's what he does a lot of. So I think when we start thinking about cost to build, and start thinking, one option being the municipality building it versus the private sector building it. There are avenues now that didn't exist 5 to 10 years ago, is to do sort of, PPP construction and an arrangement. So, just a footnote on a note that I remembered I was tasked to think about at our last meeting.
Questions to the public safety group? None. So one thing, just I'll say this is more common thread across the three groups is we're in the different options, no matter which one are getting prioritized. We're talking about a significant amount of dollars that will be needed, no matter what. And this is perhaps something we have to discuss when we think about the work plan and so on, but at a certain point, we have to think and discuss how could this be financed? Are there public-private partnerships? Where are areas where the state can participate in cost of buildings and so on? So we haven't figured out or haven't had a work stream or people looking at, no matter what the cost is, or we know we have to build at least one fire station. Is it usual that the state participates in the cost or not? Where do we source capital? Because that will also have a big impact potentially in how we can talk with the community and with the select board. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that is something that we could easily task our financial advisor to do that work.
Yeah.
So our financial advisor is the group that we work with when we issue debt. And we issue a lot of debt on a regular basis here, and they are available to do that analysis for us at no cost.
So, but that is debt financing for, let's say, the full amount. Let's say we need.
But if we wanted to look at how we might finance a package of capital projects over a period of time, they could put that together.
But to understand where, let's say, the state might chip in, do we have understanding which kind of projects we might ask for Massachusetts tax dollars?
I was gonna say Ripley, well, if it was Ripley,
Yeah.
the MSBA, you can tap into them for renovations, we keep getting turned down for new builds, but any capital needs at Ripley, we could go to them and as part of that program.
So that would be probably one stream offline, not for now, but for the second phase. Or when we really narrowing it down, we have to work with you, Carrie, today. So what kind of projects, or what kind of projects are what kind of state pots theoretically available? And what are they typically covering in terms of percentage of the project? And that would be
Yeah, I mean, it's easy on the municipal side, nothing.
No.
We
talked about that already.
You know, we can, there's,
It's particular grant programs.
right,
That which do not approach millions of dollars. It might be $500,000 here, $1 million there for, or maybe even 2 million for MassWorks grant or something like that. Specifically for public works related stuff, most likely. There are a menu of other programs that Concord would presumably qualify for once under the Housing Choice Bill, once new units actually get built. But it doesn't approach any, it's just, it would amount to a rounding error for the cost of the construction. And the only thing and the critical part is to look at where you could fit in any additional debt over what period of time and what does that look like? So as the existing debt goes down, where can you take it up? What, would. And
okay. And
I have a question.
yeah,
So Tracy, when you said that MSBA has funding for Ripley, does
For
that,
renovations,
would that have to be that site, or could it be Ripley's, or school admin is consolidating?
It would be at Ripley.
It has
So
to
it would
be-
be that school building. I don't think you could tweak it into anything else. They're not gonna give us funding to build a new like preschool campus somewhere. I can pretty much guarantee you of that, but I think it would be to renovate, cause that's an option for us that we always know sits out there. If something were to go awry, like the heating system, and we didn't plan for that, we would go to NSBA for repair costs and enter into that program,
But they wouldn't,
if accepted.
okay, right, I understand, but you don't think that they would fund new renovation, a new building for a school?
Not in
admin?
Concord, no. The middle school applied, I don't know, 5 years in a
No,
row.
I know.
And I know like Burlington, just that shut down again, they've applied, I think, 10 years in a row. Our high school had applied many years in a row, so it's highly unlikely.
And the standard they use to fix a building is lower than the standard they would use to actually build a new
Yeah.
building.
I think there's more money available in the repair programs than, I mean, for new builds, they're really looking at buildings that are, 60 years old and towns that don't have the ability to pay for those buildings.
And this would just be for education purposes, so you couldn't
Yes.
utilize it for something else. So it couldn't become like a town use.
I don't think so, no.
Is it admin? Does it cover an admin building? No.
No,
It would
but we have a
only be the
preschool
preschool.
there.
It would only be the integrated.
But that
preschool.
building is,
Okay, that-
well, but it is a school. It is a school.
The
It's an
integrated-
administrative building and we have the preschool there. It's a little bit tricky, so I'm not sure, but we need the heating system for the preschool to exist there. So it would cover a heating system, or like roof repairs you need for the preschool to be
Do you
there.
think this is enough that we should actually go out and try to get an estimate for that?
I don't know that offhand. I don't know that. We'd have to do a little more research into it, potentially, but that's the only money that I think is available out there to municipalities.
All right,
Just on that point, though, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but are we comfortable saying that Ripley is 50% utilized? So we're talking about potentially going out and spending money and fixing a heating system that may fix a current use.
I would say it's 50. It's probably more like 80.
yeah,
80%.
it was over
I would say.
80%
Over
when you
80,
gave us
right,
the
like
numbers.
85-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's,
Okay, thanks.
okay. A nice try to find money.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Everyone has color papers, so go ahead. Or we can propose a Bitcoin mining activity for the town. All right, if there are no further questions to the subcommittee, just again, on all of you is have the timeline in mind. It's already December, we have the holidays coming. It's getting tight with mid to end of January. At least narrowing the work down, and I expect, to be honest, that there will be still a certain amount of open questions at that point. But think about order of magnitudes, think about as where this goes directionally, and then also step back and like, are there certain things that would fundamentally change the way you look at a certain option, and would you need additional information on that? No. Okay. Next on the agenda is review the results of the facility assessment master plan questionnaire. Judith and I should got the consolidated answers like minutes before this, so I have to postpone this agenda item. Again, we will summarize that in a digestible way.
What is the master plan questionnaire? I mean, what is that?
So we went back to the different town functions, and we asked every. You want to summarize it and what the questionnaire was?
Yeah, the questionnaire was the same questionnaire that was in the TBA report
Yeah.
that went
Okay.
to individual departments,
Okay.
and we put the same exact questionnaire in forms and asked departments that answered it in 2020 to answer it again now based on things that might have changed.
And that will be important, also useful for the consolidation group, so, yeah.
And the facilities assessment, does that include like Peabody? Is that everything?
So I don't think Peabody is included in that, but it's the same exact departments that submitted the questionnaire in 2020 and the TBA report answered it again.
Okay, I just wanna make
You
sure
have
we
a-
have
yeah.
a facilities assessment.
It's a great question, Mary. I think what's happened is, it's one of those things that we thought was a good idea to get that information. And what's happened is that we've acquired it informally by having interactions with staff, right? So even though it's well worth reviewing the responses because we might pick up some input from staff that we haven't spoken to, but by and large, that information has been acquired and confirmed through conversations with individual staff members.
Okay, we just don't have the results in a format to talk
And
about
right
that.
now, we
Okay,
just got
got
it
it,
in
got
an
it.
Excel format, we just do it in a more digestible.
Great.
Okay,
Shannon, would it be possible for the Public Works Subcommittee just to see what was presented by the Public Works Department, and just mostly, I think, so we could compare it back to the original, report that was done.
Yeah,
years ago.
I'm gonna look at Alan and Russ because I don't think they submitted responses.
Oh, okay.
Stay at the school.
Yeah, Aaron
Here.
and I are gonna put those together, the public works side, and Darren when he comes back.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And for people that want to get a head start at looking at this, I'll re-forward the email. I sent this out to you some time ago. If you're looking for a specific department's needs, I saved their response to the updated survey in the property folders in SharePoint. So if you're looking to see what the finance department's needs are, go to the townhouse property folder and the response is going to be there.
what we are trying to do, Julie and I, is to consolidate that.
Right.
In view that you have one document
Yeah.
where you see all those things instead of trying, which building, which folder, where do we have to find it?
Yes.
I have a question, Sven. Earlier you said that you're hoping that you have the subcommittee reports in January, right, with prioritization, options and prioritizations by end of January,
Yeah.
right? For us, that's highly dependent upon getting all this data that we're listing here. So I'm wondering, is this realistic?
Well, that moves us to the next agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah, work updates. And on that, I think again, our real guru in the group on work planning and how we get things done is Judith. So Judith, you wanna start guiding us through the work plan update?
Sure. Great. Can everybody see that? At least it looks like my screen with the right thing on it. Okay.
I see everything on your screen, so.
All right. Okay. So work plan updates. I will say for the record that I prefer to be thought of as the guru of land use planning as opposed to the guru of getting this particular project delivered on time. But let's keep our fingers crossed that we get there, right? Okay, so this should look familiar to everybody. This was our original timeline. And I think, I do think we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace here because we were tossed into this project, which I think is very important for the town. And I think it was important that it be done. But we didn't really know what we were going to find once we started looking around corners, looking at parcels and looking at issues and so forth. So when we created our work plan, if we don't completely hew to some of these, some of these dates and deliverables, I think that's fine, right? So let's give ourselves some grace. That said, we are still in phase one, and then we will be shifting into phase two. And as I started looking at this timeline and thinking about how to update the group best about delivering a product, I kind of wanted to re-visualize how, certainly at this point, I see the final deliverable shaping up so that we can begin to get on the same page and get some of your input about that deliverable, because I think we need to have a sense of what this final project looks like at the end of July so that we can understand what phase two looks like. So I'm going to show a graphic. I just want to preface it by saying it's draft. But the idea here is for us to begin with the end in mind at this point, to borrow a Stephen Coveyism, which is to say, let's try to imagine where we're going to be in July and what we're delivering to the select board. So here's a graphic, right, that is just representing conversations that Sven and I have been having. Certainly.
We have a hard to, we see it
Can you guys see it?
you see your speaker screen, not your presenter screen.
Oh, you know what? We ran into this last time, so it's too small for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, hang on. So I'm going to go back into the actual software. Yep. Now I'm going to play around here. So give me a second. Make this as big as I can. I'm also on a laptop here, so I'm just, how's that? Is that pretty big?
Good.
Okay.
Better? Okay. So, I think of this as like we're in phase one, right? Here's phase one, then there's going to be phase two. And then when I think about where are we going and what is this going to look like at the end of our year, I think of phase three as what are we delivering to the select board, right? So there's three sort of columns in this graphic. So the first column is phase one, and this is basically what we've been doing for the last 5 months. And it's been a little bit messy. Different groups are operating at different speeds depending on their level of complexity and number of sites and so forth. But I do think at the end of the day that we have achieved something which is commendable, and that is that we have a group of 10 people as well as some key municipal staff that are getting to the point where we are all on roughly the same page with regard to these properties, these buildings, costs, and other kinds of issues, right? And that's remarkably helpful because I think we all came in with very different impressions and different levels of familiarity with some of these issues. So this sort of getting to know the project phase, I think has been very helpful, even if we've all been operating sort of at different speeds. We are coming together. And the way that we're going to come together is through these subgroup reports, which will summarize the analysis that we've done, the options that we've identified, and some evaluation of those options. And in phase one, you'll see that I've got kind of this green circle. I think, Sven uses this term a lot, sort of order of magnitude data. In a perfect world, we would have known all of the data that we needed before we started, right? But we simply didn't know what data we needed. And now that we're getting a better handle on what data we need, the challenge is that that's still, if we need to get an expert consultant to provide us with that data, there's a procurement process which has a built-in delay. And that built-in delay, which is nobody's fault, it's just simply how bills get paid in the public sector, it means that we likely are not going to have more detailed data at the precise right time that we need it in order to shape our decisions. So I'm going to call the data that we're largely using in phase one order of magnitude data, which means, instead of maybe having a precise market valuation for a particular parcel, that we have a pretty good valuation based on conversations with realtors and other folks in town who are expert with this sort of thing. So that's the difference between, say, of order of magnitude data versus precise data. That's what we have in phase one. That's what we're working with. And I think the Municipal Consolidation Committee can probably nod and say that they're grappling with how do we use the data that we have, which is pretty good, but not perfect. And then how do we go and identify when we need more precise data and then hopefully get it delivered at the right time, right? So order of magnitude data. And we're heading into the point where we have this red box, the subgroup reports. That is going to come to us as a group again in February, right? Ideally, our subgroup reports are done in January or February, and then we head into this thing called phase two. And at this point, happily, I think for many of you, the subgroup work and meetings should end. And from that point forward, we are working as a 10-person group. And our main task is to, as indicated in this first box, is to integrate the recommendations, analysis, and options that the subgroups have identified, right? So we're going to take the 3 reports, we're going to read them, the subgroups will present them, and we'll have some good, robust discussion about the options and priorities that they've identified. And then we will be tasked with, as a group, sorting those options and priorities based on cost and other things. As part of the phase 2 work, we will also have, I think, there are a couple of urgent issues. There may be more than 2, by the way. Again, this is a draft. But the phase 2 work is going to have to respond to the public works option at MCI, because the MCI project needs to move forward. That is on a separate timeline, and they need to be able to move into the zoning bylaw amendment process. So we are going to have to address the public works at MCI issue in the context of phase 2. So when you think about us sitting around having meetings, right, we're going to integrate our subgroup material, but we're also going to have to pay some attention to the public works, specifically the option that's looking at MCI. The second focus topic that we're going to have to look at is Peabody, because the town has, at least at this point, indicated that they wish to be able to make a decision about Peabody sooner rather than later, right? So if we're trying to make a decision about Peabody so that we can reduce our exposure to ongoing carrying costs at that site, then we need to make a decision, or at least, make recommendations to the select board so the select board can make a decision about Peabody. So I think we would have to focus on that as well. And then the third focus area for the work that would be done in phase 2 is to think about the implications of these 3 things, right? The 3 boxes above, which are the integrated recommendations across the subgroups, the Public Works MCI site, and then Peabody, and then think about the implications for all of the other land, buildings, and uses that are kind of, in the public mind. They're important in the context of, say, Ripley or 2229. And so when we talk, I think we've used the phrase domino effect, right? So what is the domino effect of the recommendations that the group is making on these other parcels, right? So we came into this project thinking, can 2229 be used for any of these 3 public works, or public buildings types of uses? And, for at least 2 of the groups, 2229 has come off the table. So we can talk about that and those implications. We put all of that into a final report, and then that goes to the select board, right? So I'm trying to imagine, and I'm curious what you guys think about, what are we giving to the select board, and what is the select board going to do with it? Because, for example, we can recommend to the select board, yes, we think the public safety buildings need to be addressed. Here are some ideas that we have, or some options that we've evaluated. But the select board from that point forward is really going to have to establish a public safety buildings committee, and then have a singular committee that's running with that particular project. It's a customary approach in local government to, once you've decided to deal with your public safety buildings, you have a dedicated committee that works on that. So it's not like the work that the land use working group does is going to somehow substitute for that process. I think it's just going to launch that process. You may feel differently. This is just me thinking aloud. Same thing for municipal consolidation. We're going to tell the select board, here are the recommendations based on the work that the group has done. And then the select board is going to make a decision about whether or not they want to proceed with further detail and further analysis on that particular decision. The third element is, what happens to the land use working group? We have a 1-year charge. Maybe it continues, maybe it morphs into another committee, maybe it combines with another committee, maybe it goes away. I don't know. But the idea that we can separate what it is we're trying to do in phase 1 and phase 2 from these longer decisions. We're not trying to solve with any, certainty some of these decisions. They will require further study. They will require expert consultants to come in and think about the design and the site planning for a new West Concord fire station. We're not, even if we wanted to do that in phase 2, it would take 3 to 4 months to run the bid process for a project of that scale. So I think it's helpful, and hopefully that, I haven't gone on too long here, but I think it's really helpful to start thinking about where our work ends and where the next phase of the select board's work begins. So I don't know if that's graphic is helpful, but it's just starting to sort out some of these deliverables, and then also to put some bounds on what it is that we are expecting of ourselves and of this report at the end of the process.
If you have questions in the room here, please.
I'm sure I do. So I'm going to discuss the template and that sort of stuff as well, but why don't we just stop here and just hear what people have to say?
It's Keith. First, great presentation, Judith. I think it really is a thoughtful approach to just how complicated this is, what level of information we have at each level. And so thank you for that. A few questions, though, just to put out there. Answers are not necessary, but a revised end date for our work. We're a 12-month committee. This looks like we're now 18 to 24 months. Just to put that out there. On the matter of options for public works at MCI, and that we would get to zoning in this, in what's called phase 2 here. I presume that there's a separate track that is already known to the town when the zoning for MCI Concord is headed for town meeting to satisfy whatever MCI's or rather DCAM's expectation is of when that's going to happen. So just so long as whatever that is, that reality is plugged into what our program is. On what I'm not seeing here before we submit a final report is what our charge calls phase 2. Which is not the phase 2 that's up there, but the charge is phase 2. Phase 1 is solving public safety, public works, and municipal consolidation. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is commercial housing, recreation, open space. So there needs to be some expression, I think, and I'm glad to see that some of the data gathering that would be helpful, that there's some information being put together that will help that what the charge calls phase 2 when we get there. I'd just be interested to see on a chart when we're going to get there. So thank you very much for putting this all together.
Great, thanks. I'm sure there are other folks who have questions and comments.
Yeah.
Judith, is there any room for the committee to prioritize needs? That being, given where West Concord is going, maybe the fire department's the first priority, maybe police is second, maybe DPW's 3. I don't know what the order is, but at some level, I would think that we've done a fair amount of work and have some opinions as to the current state of maybe what can be continued, sort of Band-Aid approach to continue, but what really is sort of a burning need to replace. And then I think it's going to naturally follow through, but I think there's going to be a public question, public being a resident question as to, gee, I thought part and parcel of this was we were going to sell something to fund a whole bunch of bills that are coming down the road. And if the answer is we need Peabody, we need Ripley, well, maybe the answer is, well, gee, we looked at it and unfortunately from a fiscal perspective, there is nothing to sell given that municipal needs dictate that we continue to own and possibly repurpose those properties. So I'm hoping this prioritization of where the fires are really burning, and then secondarily what the 18 property again priority as far as repurposing and possibly using or selling looks like.
Yeah, so I totally agree, Mark. The word priorities is, I mean, obviously there's a lot to take in on this chart, right? But the word priorities is the second thing in the final report. So the idea that we would take, I see that as being a big part of our discussions in the phase 2 here, which is how do we recommend to the select board which ones require the most urgent attention across the 3 groups, right? So I see that as being important. And so it's just one word on the chart, but I do think that that's an important part of what we're doing. And then, Keith's excellent points about paying attention to other uses. Again, this is on the chart. It's probably not in sufficient details. But focus number 3, implications for other land, which would include the disposition angle mark, other buildings and other uses. Although I will say, I think there's always been 2 different narratives around phase 2. And I think the phase 2 in the charge is probably honestly unrealistic as a deliverable that we would somehow be able to I mean, it's taken us long enough to corral volunteers and staff to do a fairly limited set of questions around municipal buildings, so that the idea that we're somehow going to resolve questions around commercial uses, that's a huge topic. Recreational uses, also a huge topic, et cetera. So I can see us identifying, sort of some very broad brushes with regard to alternative uses. But I think that as part of the original charge, that was simply an unreasonable scope for a committee of this size that has not had many resources to fall upon. That really is a long-range planning exercise, and to suggest that that can be done with no resources over a year, I think is pretty unrealistic. So I think we'll do the best we can, but much of the work in phase 2 is going to be sorting out the tremendous amount of work that's been done in phase 1. That's my personal opinion. Others may feel differently, but I just don't think it's possible to do that in the space of a single year with 10 volunteers.
I have a suggestion. First, I'd suggest that you start calling the phases 1A, when
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I like that.
We're never going to get to phase 2, then let's not put it up there. I think that the reason I'm a volunteer for the committee was with the phase 2 work. I'm suffering the phase 1 work, and you're doing great. You're doing a great job, and I get the idea that this is a study of town-owned land. And some of the town-owned land is going to, and addressing the needs of the town departments are going to be met by either renovating or maybe acquiring other town-owned land. And the rest of the land we're looking at goes to the standpoint of, well, gee, some of the property that we don't need anymore, can we sell it? And if so, for what? Commercial development, to set it aside for housing where there is money available to help with the development anyway, or recreation, because there are town holdings that would be appropriate for that purpose. So I think our universe, I was envisioning the universe at phase 2 would not be all of the land inside the town limits, but rather to be looking at the inventory of land that we are reviewing for phase 1, and what don't we need to meet town needs, and are any of those suitable for other purposes that the select board has identified.
Yeah, I think this is important, and that we have to expand it, whatever is behind the box focus 3 over there. I think that needs to be mapped out a little bit more. I imagine and envision that we will have some serious discussions also around potential zoning of these things if we look at these potential uses. Because we have interest to have more commercial, but we also potentially want to have certain areas rezoned from a AA to B to make it more attractive. So we will have hopefully these discussions, and perhaps we have to broaden what is there on focus 3, or put a focus 4 in addition to it there.
I also think that if you go through and you kind of, I don't know what the number is, but if you go to the 18 possible properties, if you will. And you figure out, well, we need the 15. Depending on what the three are, you know,
Yeah.
there are ones that are naturally to be a perfect fit for recreation. For
Yeah.
example, maybe a lousy fit for commercial depending upon the location. So I think there's still an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Once you understand
Yeah.
sort of where we are with the first piece of it.
Yeah.
And then what sort of falls to sell, convert, you know,
Yeah.
to some other purpose.
Yeah. Mary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Judith, for getting, asking us to look at something that I think is really very complex and you're trying to get, a handle on it here with this slide. So, thank you for your bravery here. I think in phase one, I think we're in good shape. I think phase two is really where we need to focus, and anything we don't do in phase two, I hear you say kind of falls into subsequent work, right? Am I understanding this correctly? So phase two on your slide, what you're calling phase two or 1A2. While you were talking about that, I looked at the charge that the select board had written, and by the select board, I mean
You?
me. And I realized this is very aggressive, very, very aggressive. And as we got into the work, I think we all realized how much we needed to know, how much data we needed, how much conversation we needed. So I think it might be a good idea if we, and I need help figuring out how to do this, how we rewrite the charge to actually align with what's possible in phase two that ends in July. Because this charge is no longer relevant. It's unrealistic, back to what we were talking about before. And then whatever we think is realistic for phase two would have to be done subsequently by some of the same people in this room would be doing the subsequent work. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it's just something you have to potentially bring back to your select board members. Raise the awareness of that.
Yes,
And then if you collectively say you want to narrowing it, the charge down for practical purposes, I think it's, the co-chairs can work with you as the select board members, but in the end, it's the select board's call what you're putting into a charge sheet for us.
okay, then I think what would be good to have a conversation about what do we think we can really realistically do in phase two by the end of July. What do we, what do we think we can realistically do? And if we look here at what integrate into the subgroups, I think that's possible. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The next one, I'm having a hard time reading this now. The implications for public works at MCI, yes, I believe that's possible. Implications for Peabody, yes, I believe that's possible. Other buildings, that's where it gets for me kind of vague. What are other people's thoughts?
I think I would propose here
Yeah, what do you?
is instead of like let the whole group be focused on executing towards the January and January.
The subgroup,
Just
okay.
all let us focus on that,
Okay,
and perhaps we have the co-chairs with one or two of the select board members have an extra discussion about what the work plan, what is realistic on the work plan.
okay. Yep.
Instead of us now trying to second guess and spiraling down in a negative view what we believe is possible. I think it's between the two co-chairs, and we have two members of the select board in there. I think the four can have a very good view as the realistic outcome.
I do think that the focus three of the middle phase. It would be helpful to identify any properties that are not needed, or if there are any town properties when it all shakes out.
Yes,
That are available for other disposition. I
Yeah.
think that's what I was hoping to get out of
yes,
out of this whole process. That, I said at the beginning, I'm agnostic about where housing should go. I don't know if it should go at the Peabody School or Ripley or Kai's Road, once DPW, if DPW leaves there, I'm agnostic on that. Those are decisions that get made and ought to get made in phase one, and whatever left. That's those are where the opportunities are created for reusing those, either by, as we talked about, recreation or housing, or to making them available for sale for commercial purposes. That's where, and I don't see how we can complete the work if we only tell the town how we want to spend money and not how we want to get money from
Exactly.
sale.
I definitely, I'm not concerned about identifying the leftovers or the domino effect. What we see there, I'm potentially more concerned to bring, and then we have to see how it works, it's how we come to a recommendation, what to do with the domino effect and leftovers of phase one. Because you can start as I get the knives out and fully out. If you say there's a lot, you can use it for residential, for recreation, conservation, commercial. That could be another complex evaluation in setting priorities and how you look at the different uses. Identifying the leftovers, I have no concern. The concern is more the process of coming to a general view and what our recommendations of the respective uses are.
Yes, and just as phase three has spin-offs for public safety or consolidation or whatever else, the future uses of those properties could be
To spin off.
a spin-off in phase three.
Yes,
That's
one of the things, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
No, I wanna say, a lot of this makes sense and is very thoughtful. The only thing I would like to mention as well is not only should we be thinking about this sort of internal process that this group has been going through, but also, realize that we probably want, maybe we want to get to the final report and have an aha moment for the rest of the community, or maybe we don't. But I would think as you're working through this stream of your process, think about communications and where it appropriately fits in to what we'll be doing in phase 1B, 2, 3. So that
The letter is long, the alphabet is long.
so that we bring other people along. I'm kind of glad we have obviously some very interested, committed people who have been wonderful with us on this ride. But we're gonna need to figure out how to bring more people into this story before we have recommendations that, come from nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to look a little bit, okay,
Yeah, I just want to second that. We need to bring more
Yeah.
people. I don't know where,
okay.
but
We put it on the list.
okay.
We still have to, Jude wants to go very quickly through the template that
Okay,
one group is using, but again, we also have a potential executive session in front of us too, so
okay.
let's speed up a little bit. Good?
All right, let me, I'm not going to do that slide. Okay, so I have a template. I can do this very quickly. I think that we're aiming for reports that would be about 20 pages written with appendices, just to give you a sense of the scale. We don't want them to be too long. We don't want them to be too short. So about 20 pages of text.
We stopped reading it.
Yeah, that's too long.
5 bullet points and round.
Yeah, that's too long.
So I'm sorry, you're saying the slide is too long or the template is too long?
The 20-page report is too long. It just is. Sorry.
Well, you can certainly have an executive summary. I have a hard time imagining how it is substantially shorter, but I tell you what, we can run through the public safety one and see how it goes. But we just talked about communication. and being able to communicate some of the rationale for what we're doing, I think happens in these reports. But let's give it a shot. So here's a template, and you can simply, use it as you see fit. I'll make this a little bit larger. So you'll have an executive summary, or maybe it seems to me that people want to have the executive summary be the report. That's fine. So an executive summary, I think you guys all know what that is. A little bit of a background on the particular issue. So that's the introduction. Role of that particular set of facilities in Concord. These are little half pagers. Existing conditions. So we're going to have to describe the existing conditions of the particular facilities that we're looking at. So Public Works is going to have to describe what's wrong with Keyes Road. Public Safety is going to have to describe what's wrong with the fires and police stations and so forth. A little bit of a future needs assessment. So, what are we looking at in the future as regards some of the options that we're looking at? A report on benchmarking. So if you've looked at other buildings, what do the other buildings look like? How much did they cost? So on and so forth. The options, you're going to have to describe the options. I think you can do this in a table fairly quickly. You're going to have to describe the evaluation criteria. Again, you can probably do this in a table, and I've presented examples last time. A discussion of trade-offs and uncertainties. So, depending on the number of options you have, you can write those up. Recommendations in 1 to 2 pages, and you can order those by priority. You can order them by cost. You can order them by, whatever mechanism you see fit. And then next steps. So what do you see as next steps as regards your particular area of responsibility? So for public safety, the next steps would be to do an actual expert consultant needs assessment and preliminary evaluation site design for both the West Concord and Walden Street sites if we end up using Walden. And then appendices, so photo documentation, facility assessments, survey, like we have response time heat maps and stuff. So including appendices in the report as well. So that's a template. I'll make it available to you. You can do with it what you will.
Thank you.
Are we getting graduate credit for it, Judith?
I want consultant.
I think it's,
You are a true professional,
Yeah.
really. You are a true professional,
I think
Jim.
we're aiming high, but I think we're also recognizing that we need to be pragmatic. But I think having a framework, and how we've then in the end fill it,
It
yeah,
is very,
is helpful.
it is,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, the categories that we're addressing, I think are.
I also think that unfortunately, a lot of this is gonna be a big surprise to 99% of our fellow residents. They have no idea what's going on at the police station, no idea what's going on with West Concord, that fire station, the growth, what have you. So I think that if someone doesn't do this sort of hard work, someone's gonna be giving this speech with no data. And they're not gonna be able to answer questions, and it's gonna look as though the town's not prepared to entertain these types of decisions and discussions. So although Judith, I think 20 pages for a report is probably fair. We'll probably have 10 to 20 pages of appendices, but I think it really will be a great document that others will hopefully be able to refer to and leverage.
That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, with that, next point on the agenda is future meeting schedule. That will be January 9th. So we had one originally, I think, the day after New Year. We pushed it out a week.
And I
Yes.
also, I'm sorry, I think we were looking to just get some feedback on some of the studies that Megan
Oh.
put in this report, if we could go through a couple of those quickly.
So, everyone got a piece of paper here and all the different reports the town is working on. I think if, you notice that barely anyone had a chance to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was here when we
So-
walked in.
It was
Yeah.
here when you walked in, and I think Megan was saying that we're definitely looking to have this out in your packet in future meetings, but there are a couple of studies on here that we were looking to get some feedback on. on page 2 with 2.5 and 2.6. 2.5 is the development study, which was about understanding downstream infrastructure impact of future known development. And Megan and I met with Judith this week, and we were talking about potentially folding that into 2.6 with a full public safety needs assessment. And that would be a bit more of a procurement, a larger procurement exercise than I think just the development impact study. But I think that in terms of understanding what the impact is on development, I think for public safety, that's the most critical. So that was our thought there, if you could get some feedback on that.
So what I would propose, given most of you didn't have a chance to really read this, is take this list, yeah, and then you as your subgroup or as a you say, I have concerns there, or we need this and that. Email this to Shannon with Judith and me CC, that we have a comprehensive overview. And then we work in the background on what does it mean for the town and what needs to be done.
Great.
Yeah, I think one thing I forgot, Judith and I wanted to bring up on the studies. Do you want to take a leap on the general impact study and what our thinking there is, or?
Sure. So I think Shannon was just referring to this. We had talked about doing a development impact study to try to better understand the implications and the magnitude of population growth, right? Because we were trying to figure out, are we going to get, 1,000 people from MCI, or what's going to happen with the MBTA overlay, what's going to happen with the 40Bs, et cetera. Because I think many of us felt that having a better sense of population growth in a 5-year, 10-year, 15, 20-year timeframe was pretty essential to making decisions. And the building blocks of that is that you need to have an understanding of what future development projects are. And we do have at this point, the planning staff have been great. They provided us with a pretty detailed list of where we anticipate to see new developments, the size of new developments, and so forth. The big unknown, however, is we don't know what the unit breakdown is going to look like, or the number of units, frankly, for MCI. Which makes doing a development impact study, these aren't cheap, and they aren't fast, which is another related issue, but they're not cheap. And if we did it without a detailed understanding of what MCI, what the preferred scenario is, we have a pretty good chance of not hitting the target when we have the study done by a consultant. So in order to do a development impact study, I think we need to be further along with MCI, or if we try to do it now, we will end up, I think, duplicating spending. And I think we all want to be very frugal and aware as we sort of spend money on these studies. So as a trade-off, we said, well, if we can't do the development impact study now because we don't really know enough about MCI to effectively, undertake that study, to ask a consultant to undertake that study, what population information do we really need in order to be able to evaluate our 3 subgroups, right? So we've got municipal consolidation, we've got public safety, and we've got public works. We do know that our population is going to grow as a result of new developments. We also know that our population in town is declining as, new families are moving in at a slightly lower rate, and then older kids like my own are, going off to college and starting their lives outside of Concord. So we've had a net reduction in population over the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. And then we also know we're going to have some new in-migration as a result of these projects that's going to be staggered over, probably the next 10 to 15 years. At the end of the day, we're really talking about 1,000 to 2,000 people. And it might be 2,500. It might, MCI, who knows, something might not happen. Maybe it's less than 1,000, but it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people, probably, plus or minus 15%, right? If we say it's 1,000 to 2,000 people, then does that materially affect the decisions that we're making for municipal consolidation? I don't think so, right? Because maybe we're going to have, 10 more staff members. Maybe we're going to lose the need for 10 staff members because of AI, but we're talking about plus or minus 10 staff members. That doesn't really change how we think about the municipal consolidation decision, right? So it, having more detailed population numbers other than this kind of order of magnitude doesn't really change much about, I think, how we're making the decision. Public safety, yes, maybe we're going to have 1,000 to 2,000 new people. We think they're going to be largely in West Concord based on these developments. That 1,000 to 2,000 people doesn't change much about how we think about a new fire and police station. Typically, the way you think about firefighters and police officers is it's a number per 1,000 population. So if it's police officers or 1.4 new police officers for every 1,000 new population, then maybe we're talking about 2 to 3 police officers, 2 to 3 firefighters, maybe an additional bay in one of the fire stations, maybe one additional truck, maybe one additional ambulance, right? Those numbers don't materially affect how we think about the public safety building's decision, which is largely a condition and capacity and location analysis, right? So if we got more precise data and paid $50,000 to get more precise data, I don't think it would change our decision making a whole lot, because we know the population is going to be in West Concord. We have to think about putting more services in West Concord, but it doesn't change overall the numbers that much. Public Works is kind of similar. I mean, yes, we're going to have traffic implications. Yes, we're going to have, sort of thinking more about sewer and so forth. But that marginal increase of 1,000 to 2,000 people doesn't materially affect the decision to relocate from Keyes Road. So that when we were thinking about the development impact study, that's kind of what we were thinking, was maybe we don't need more specific data at this very moment in order to make the decisions or recommendations that were coming out of the subgroups. That was our thinking. You guys might feel differently, but it was very much about what do we need to know.
One thing that still, we got a lot of data, and I think what Judith and I discussed is that she and I consolidate that data, make it available in a way that you see of what kind of order of magnitudes here we are talking about, and based on what is available, based on the certain assumptions around that you can build 3 scenarios around MCI and see what does it do. Mm-hmm. What is the rest of the 40Bs doing? What is the rest, what's in the pipeline doing? What order of magnitude, and then give us a range. And then we have a documentation around that. That is not just in a meeting verbally said, this is what we are thinking. Mm-hmm. But you see a summary of what is today available without spending $50,000, which the town needs to spend when really the MCI framework is much better vetted out and go that out there. Because to the point what Judith did, she and I, we went back and forth. We always went back is, what do we need? What information is super critical when we look at the options of the different 3 work groups, and does the 2,000 or 2,500 population difference or 2,650 really make a fundamental change in how we look at the options of the working groups. But the documentation would be important, and I think Judith and I would feel comfortable to make that happen and for you to review.
I guess just mathematically, does the town have any idea as to what percentage of the population lives in West Concord?
Yeah, they have it by voter precinct. I think Carlin actually mentioned that to us. They analyze that by voter precinct data, and they've been able to get some pretty precise numbers. I thought it was in the order of magnitude of 2/3. It might be lower than that. I don't know if Carlin's.
For that
in West Concord.
Yeah. So this summarize our thought process is right now. If nobody disagrees that we would compile this data, make a Judith and Sven summary and what this data right now tells us and what we have. And then if suddenly we are saying, no, we really need to spend $50,000 for a more comprehensive analysis to think about, do we need 1 or a half a fire truck more? Then we have to make a decision then. Yeah. There was one question there, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, when we compile our 20-page reports, could you or Judith or somebody compile like
That
that
piece,
section, so we're
Yeah,
not.
no, you're not, you should not reinvent cross
Okay,
sections,
So, yeah.
yeah.
I guess my one concern is that, you know, if the 40Bs. Become effective, we know exactly how many 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms, there's something like 245, 2 and 3s.
Yeah, we have that data, right,
So we know that,
you know that, yes.
but, you know, for example, and I don't think this would necessarily be the case, but in theory, if we had, and I've seen the MCR report, and I think it's blending concepts with phase 1, phase 2. Anecdotally, it sounds like it's gonna be some sort of hybrid between 1 and 2. You know, whether there's over 55 units. Age 55, meaning not pressing upon the schools, but if there isn't, it's a massively different calculus. And so I'm just wondering,
We're not deciding on the school capacity here.
I understand, but we're not gonna, it will also shed light on demand as well.
Yeah.
So if we start putting a lot of older folk, you know,
Yeah.
including me, you know, in that area, then more EMTs, more fire, what have you, on an already stressed situation.
Yeah.
So I'm just, it's good, I guess, in some way for us to be able to punt to the MCI committee, advisory board. I'm just not sure we'll ever really get the data, because
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna be as concrete as this is where potentially DPW is, this is potentially how much commercial we have, this is conceptually how much housing we have, and our housing looks like this.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have that ability.
So I think the MCI question here is, the working assumption, Julie and I discussed is, we can assume MCI is equivalent of 2 or 3 40Bs. We know the 40B numbers. We have that unit and size
That's a
stuff.
lot.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
No, let's assume that, and we can always scale down from there. Yeah. But that, if you say, let's say 2 40Bs, we can take the profile of a 40B. In thinking about what kind of unit numbers, bedroom numbers they are, and then run it through. Let us do that, provide that, and then you shoot holes in it, and then we can decide which holes are critical for our thing and where do we have to spend money.
Is there any further studying being done? $500,000 available to the MCI Concord process, so is any of that money being spent on anything that will answer any
To be-
questions?
To be determined.
Yeah, okay.
I should mention really quickly that Megan and Shannon and Sven and I, when we met, did discuss launching the needs assessment for the public safety buildings. That can be launched actually, you know, as soon as we'd like, because we're relatively certain that we were going to have to do a detailed analysis of the public safety buildings, which would include, Mark, for those purposes, the analysis of the population projections. So they actually typically do this as part of the consulting studies for those kinds of needs assessments, that they'll run through those numbers as well from a public safety perspective, even absent more detail on MCI.
Okay, so we're already at 3:34. We discussed next meeting, January 9th. Every work group, roll up your sleeves, continue working, continue what you're doing. We have agenda item 8, the co-chairs discussed, and we would like to propose the motion to enter into executive session, what's called under MDI C30A, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, and value of real property in the context of certain options we are discussing in the different work groups.
Second.
Two things missing. First, the determination that the chair that executive session is necessary, and to say that we will not reconvene in open session thereafter.
Oh, I think I thought that the chair, Julie and I, as the chairs.
No, you have to
Just
say,
say
it.
that.
No, it's not enough for you to say it, but to know it, you have to, it has to be part of the motion.
You have to write it down.
All right, so we add that to the motion. and we are not returning to open session.
Second.
Okay, do the roll call. Let's start. Rob Almeida,
That's it, just,
yeah,
Curtis has a question before, I know that a number of people have questions, we're on the left of the. Any?
we had questions, public questions in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, sorry.
I always allow at the agenda items,
Okay.
yeah? You were missing on the beginning,
I thought,
yeah. Rob Almeida,
yes.
Keith Bergman,
Yes.
Matt Boger.
Yes.
Mary Hartman.
Yes.
Judy Blanc,
Yes.
Tracy Morano.
Yes.
Mark Martinez,
Yes.
Linda Miller.
Yes.
Sven Weber, yes.